Hello and welcome to Memories of a Musician. I'm your host, Vito DeSalvo, and once again we have a nice program for you this evening featuring a good friend, a colleague, and a wonderful woodwind artist. His name is Marino Galluzzo. Marino and I spent all 4 years at Duquesne University School of Music together, and I knew Marino as a bass clarinetist. He played bass clarinet in the symphonic band, and we called it the Duquesne University Symphony Band. And that's what I remember most. And one thing about this show and this program that I can tell you for sure, for me personally, every guest that I have, so far I've known every guest and have had a sort of past history with them, but everyone, I learned so much more about them than I knew prior to me digging into their history and so forth. So it's kind of interesting for me to learn so much about each of these guests. And Marino is no exception. I've learned so much about him and the music that he performs and where he performed and where he spent, his time and the people we studied with, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very interesting. And I'm going to tell you more about us, besides the fact that Marino and I share the music passion. We have another passion that we share, and I'm going to tell you about that later in the show. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Marino. And I think it was right, he'll clear this up, but maybe right after Duquesne or during the later years that we were students at Duquesne, Marino was one of the main founders of the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet. And that group has stayed together for over 50 years now. And when the group was about maybe a year out doing their, they were having a concert in honor of the 50th anniversary of the group. Marino contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in composing a piece specifically for their 50th anniversary concert. And I said that I'd be honored to do that, and that'd be wonderful. So I went ahead and I composed a piece of music called Divertimento for saxophone quartet. And this is the first piece that I really ever wrote for a saxophone quartet. And what I'm going to like to do for you is, I'm not going to play the whole piece. It's a little over 6 minutes, but I did take little excerpts from it. And I'm going to play a little montage with this, and you actually see them performing as well, because this is a video directly from the concert, which was in June of, I believe, 2023. And so let me play this for you. This is my Divertimento for saxophone quartet, and this is the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet with Marino Galluzzo playing soprano saxophone on this. Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet on the 50th anniversary celebration concert of the group, Marino Galluzzo playing soprano sax. And so it was a wonderful experience for me to work with Marino and the group and put this together. So we'll talk about that maybe later, or maybe another time I'll play the whole piece for you. You can also find that on my YouTube channel, and you can listen to the whole piece right there as well. So before I bring Marino onto the program, let me give you just a little bit of background about Marino. I'm going to put my glasses on here, so try to make this right here. Marino has appeared as a saxophone and woodwind soloist and ensemble performer across the United States, Canada, and Italy. His performances include radio, television, recording, symphony orchestra, and shows with top local and international celebrities. He is one of the founders of the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet, performing together for over 50 years. He also was a founding member of both the Canadian Saxophone Quartet and the Canadian Woodwind Trio. Although retired as an educator, his former university teaching experience includes adjunct professor of saxophone and woodwinds at Duquesne University, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and West Liberty University in West Virginia. He is a retired public school music teacher with over 25 years of experience teaching in the Uniontown, Mount Lebanon, and Pittsburgh public school districts, teaching both instrumental and vocal music. Marino is a freelance woodwind artist performing concerts and offering clinics and master classes. Marino has recorded with the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet's 2 CDs. Marino has performed at the World Saxophone Congress in Evanston, Illinois, and other World Saxophone Congress regional events. Marino maintains a private online woodwind studio for 24 years. He has hosted a summer saxophone and woodwind workshop featuring many top international and local jazz and classical artists, clinicians, and educators. He has presented numerous concerts and clinics on all woodwind instruments. Marino is also very active in arranging and composition. Some of Marino's teachers include Nestor Koval, First Prize Paris Conservatory, Bernard Cirilli, Pittsburgh Symphony, Larry Teal and Donald Cinta, University of Michigan, master class lessons with Jean-Marie Londo and Fred Hemke and Eugene Rousseau. Marino is a Selmer saxophone endorsing artist. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me please bring on and invite here to our program. This is Mr. Marino Galluzzo. There you are. Hey, Marino, how you doing today?
Good, Vito. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your show. I really feel honored to be here.
Oh, you're quite welcome, and it's an honor and pleasure to have you.
I would like to.
I've learned so much about you that I didn't know, which is really, really interesting to me.
I appreciate that too. I would like to say this: when you opened with the divertimento that you wrote for us, the other members of the quartet playing that were Mike Jacob on alto, Warren Yeckel on baritone saxophone, and Steve Aaron on tenor saxophone. We all enjoyed working on that piece because it was a piece that, although contemporary, had so many beautiful passages for everyone to work on, and melodic. Because as you're going to hear later in the program, I don't know if I want to say I specialized in non-melodic playing, but
you did a lot of contemporary.
The audience will see some of that.
yeah, that's right. And that was interesting too, the contemporary music that you performed. Absolutely. I like that a lot. And, I appreciate you mentioning their names because, of course, Mike Jacob was in school with us as well.
Right.
All
And so
four.
was Warren.
And Warren was as well. And Steve is a little younger. I didn't know Steve. But the three of you, we were all in college together. So first question I'd like to ask you, when did you begin studying music? What was your first instrument, and what was your inspiration to start a musical instrument?
I started in the third grade in elementary school in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. And my first instrument was the violin. And the inspiration, I guess, would have been from the parents because they were supportive of music in the family. And my dad said we had a violin in the attic.
Oh.
We brought it down, got it looked at, and that's how I started. And I started in third grade. And the rather interesting thing for me was the teacher was an itinerant teacher, but he was a wonderful musician. And for the most part, I started like you do in school with a class maybe of 4 or 5 or 6, and eventually dwindled down to just me.
Oh.
And pretty much for my entire time, I was taking private lessons in school. And then in the summers, I would go to his studio to take private lessons.
I see.
So that was my start. That was my inspiration, and I played all the way through basically high school on violin.
Well, then when did you start with the woodwinds, and which woodwind instrument was first?
Yeah, I started actually in 7th grade in junior high school. I went, I was still playing violin, but I guess I had a desire to do something else as well. Okay. And so I started on the clarinet, and I got a teacher who was a local clarinet and saxophone player who actually did a lot of big band work and touring.
Okay.
And so he was a wonderful guy to take lessons with. His name was Johnny Silver. And so I started in 7th grade there.
I see.
And by the time I was in 9th grade, I don't want to say switched to saxophone, but I did switch to saxophone, but I kept all of the other instruments up.
I see.
So I kept playing violin, I kept playing clarinet, and I started on saxophone.
Let me share a picture right here that I have. This is kind of interesting. I see you in the middle playing the violin. Huh?
Right. That's me in 6th grade at elementary school at an all-city orchestra concert.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then this picture here is this right here. Was that a PMEA event?
Yes, this was a PMEA District Junior High Orchestra.
Oh, junior. Okay.
My mother saved this picture and even the program, which I have the program somewhere, but I can't find it. I actually even have the recording of this, or I had the recording of this, and I kind of got lost. But I later found out through reading through the program that many of the people in that particular orchestra, in that picture right there, were classmates of ours at Duquesne.
I see.
So there was quite a few people who went on to study music as a career.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I remember when I started Duquesne, after going through, of course, I was a band guy because of playing euphonium, but after going through district and region and all-state band, a lot of the kids we met there, we became friends with, and then we started Duquesne, and here's at least, there had to be 10 or 12 kids that we knew quite well from all of those experiences with the Pennsylvania music educators.
In that particular picture, the fellow that's the 7th person from the left was my first teacher on violin, and I took lessons with him throughout my entire career.
Wow.
In Uniontown.
Now, after you graduated from high school, just one quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Did you ever continue? Did you ever play violin anymore?
No. Well, yes and no. Not really in any formal sense, but I did, when I eventually got to teaching, I did a lot of violin playing because a lot of my teaching students were string players, and I had programs that had orchestras, so I did a lot of playing there with them.
What advantage that was too, to have that string experience, and
yeah, which is one of the reasons I think I got that job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so we talk about the word passion, and for both you and I, music is our passion, of course. And there was a point in your career that music became your passion. And maybe we look at this picture, and this is the first generation of the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet. Is that right?
Right. These are all original founding members of the quartet. This picture, I believe, was taken in 1974. The group started in 1973. It took us that long to get pictures. But that's me on the left, with the soprano. That's George Furlow on tenor, David Matthews on alto, and Warren Yucko on baritone. And that's, of course, in the top of Mount Washington overlooking the city.
Nice. And I remember all four of those individuals quite well.
Yes.
From Duquesne.
And by the way, we were all in tuxedos, and it was 98 degrees that day.
Oh, my. It's very rarely 98 degrees in Pittsburgh.
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right. So, when you I mentioned here in your bio, I read that you spent some time in Canada. And so I wanted to ask you about that. I have a couple of photos, and I do have a little video that I'll play. But first, before I even show that, can you tell me about when you left Pittsburgh and went to Canada? How did that all happen?
Sure. I was back home working, odd jobs and teaching part-time and that type of thing. And I was actually making plans to go to France to study with either the teacher at the Paris Conservatory or the teacher at the Conservatory in Bordeaux. And I was accepted at both the Bordeaux Conservatory and the Conservatory in Brussels. The teacher at the Paris Conservatory would have accepted me, he said, except I was over the age limit.
Oh, okay.
For acceptance.
Interesting.
So I'm preparing myself to go to France to study with Jean-Marie Landex.
Okay.
And I had the scholarship, a full scholarship, for that. And in the meanwhile, the quartet and I, we went to Canada for a workshop, and we played and so on and so forth. Then I went back the next year and played, and Jean-Marie Landex was there as a guest artist. And so I played for him in the master class. And then the fellow in Toronto, who I later went with the quartet, he offered me a job right on the spot.
Oh, wow.
So then I'm sitting back thinking, should I do the job or should I go to France to study? Because either one of those seemed viable for me at the time. And I guess because of the fact that I was scuffling, monetarily, I decided to go for the job. So I went to Canada, and I spent 5 years there playing with the Paul Brody Quartet and 2 years.
Is this picture here, that quartet there?
Yes, that's the Paul Brody Saxophone Quartet. That's Paul Brody on the left playing soprano. John Celestian is the tenor player. John Price is the baritone player, and I'm playing alto there on the far right.
I see.
And this was in a CBC television studio. We did a TV broadcast across Canada and Northern America, and Northern United States, excuse me. And this was part of the publicity. But I went for that particular group. We toured through Canada several times. Let's just say it that way.
Okay.
So,
And I have one other picture from your Canadian days.
yeah.
This
Now
year.
this was, I'm going to say, what's that say? 1981.
Yeah.
I was that was a big band that did a lot of work in the Hamilton, Ontario area.
Okay.
And I was living in Hamilton at the time, and this was the Hamilton Convention Center. And the group was very popular and very good. As a matter of fact, I guess I would need glasses to see that better too. But
were you playing?
I'm the last player on the right there in the front row on saxophone, but the third player, John Price, was also in the Canadian saxophone quartet that you're going to see later.
Okay. All right. So I have a little video montage of Canadian. So let's put this up and let's watch this here.
Okay.
Here we go. Yeah, that was a pretty exciting piece, that Rimsky-Korsakov. Huh?
Yeah, that's a very interesting piece that it was arranged originally by Larry Teal, and who was a professor emeritus at University of Michigan, was. And he wrote that arrangement for two altos, tenor and baritone. And I liked the piece a lot. So I thought, let's see if it works for soprano. So I rewrote and I had to rework a little bit to make it for the soprano, alto, tenor, and bari. Okay. And it was quite popular. The one thing I will tell you about that is in many of your past shows, which I've watched all of them, and I will continue to watch all of them because they're so great. But the fact is, we almost never had professional recording done of the group.
Right.
That was a professional recording, and that was a live CBC radio broadcast.
Okay.
In Canada that went again across the Canada and northern United States. The interesting thing was it was an outdoor concert.
Okay.
It was 45 degrees. Ooh. We had to go into the sound booth to warm up. I don't even mean warm up our instruments. I mean warm up
your hands.
And that particular program was the very first program of the Canadian Saxophone Quartet, our very first gig.
Wow.
And the program had to be stopped before it even got started because there was a bear roaming the campground.
Wow.
And the bear actually roamed up on stage and knocked one of the stands over.
Jeez.
And so, of course, then we had to go back and set things up again and then go back into the booth and warm up and then go back. So it was kind of funny. But
that gives credence to keeping a shotgun in your saxophone case. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that CBC and the recordings up there. I did a program with Georgia Fumanti, who's going to be a guest on the program in here in a few weeks. In Georgia, she lives in Montreal now. She's from Tuscany, Italy, but she lives in Montreal. And Georgia toured all over Canada with her, and I think we were in Toronto and did a program there for the CBC, and it was like you said, it was broadcast all over Canada and North America. Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like our PBS stations, similar type thing. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what I got from it, anyways. You know, when I was thanks. So you spent 5 years in Canada, then you returned to the United States, and then you did many concerts, many performances, and workshops.
Right.
And I have another little video montage of that era of where you were doing all of these performances back after the Canada years. You're back in the U.S. and now at that point, did you get the Three Rivers Saxophone Quartet back together?
To be quite truthful, we never lost it. As a matter of fact, I came back while I was living in Canada to play concerts.
Okay.
With the group. Now, granted, we didn't do as much work, but we did actually. It was interesting. There was a thing, and I don't know if it still exists, called the Pittsburgh Concert Society, and we auditioned for that, and we won that. And of course, I had already gone to Canada, and our concert was scheduled after I was there. So basically, I kept coming back to play, and I was playing with two groups at the same time.
So it never dissolved. It never
dissolved. No.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's play this. And do you want to give any commentary? You know what I'm going to play, and it's several pieces.
You're right.
Little excerpts of several pieces.
Right.
You want a commentary maybe before or after?
Let me comment on after, because I think it's better if I could explain after the fact.
Let's share this with the audience here. Well,
Yeah.
okay. That's a lot of material, a lot of interesting pieces. And before you start your commentary, just one comment, and you tell me if I'm right. But in all of the orchestral instruments and band instruments, saxophone is the newest of all of those instruments. Is that right?
Pretty much so. And here's what most people maybe don't know. I couldn't say for sure, but the actual saxophone was invented to be an orchestral instrument.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes, when Adolph Sax invented the instrument, his concept was he wanted an instrument with the flexibility of a woodwind, but with the power of a brass.
I see.
To fit into the harmonic structure of the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And, it didn't catch on the way I guess he had hoped, but Bizet was one of the first composers to write and keep it. And of course, there are many, many spots where the orchestra uses a saxophone. And I myself, I was very fortunate for 20 years to be called to play the saxophone parts with the Pittsburgh Symphony. And so I got to play almost pretty much everything.
Yeah.
But the pieces that you played there, many of them, although not all of them, were directly a result of the saxophone workshop that we held every summer for 24 years.
Okay.
And so during that time, the quartet always did a major recital on that week-long event. And then Nancy and I always did a full recital on that week-long event. So the first thing you heard, which was the Mendelssohn clarinet concert piece, was Mike Jacob and myself playing clarinet and Nancy playing piano.
Mm-hmm.
And again, these are short excerpts because, these pieces are quite long. I guess I should have talked before Penelope, but I'll mention that. The tableau was the second thing you heard, a 4 and 5 move. It's a 5 movement work, so you heard movement 4 and 5 excerpts. And that piece is special to me because I played that piece for Jean-Marie Londex in a master class, and I still have the original music with his pencil marks.
Oh, wow.
And so that piece is special to me, for that reason. I studied other things with him, but that one in particular. The Stars and Stripes, that was a period where I played with the Graham Grubb big band. And, when Graham realized I could play piccolo, he pulled this tune up and said, let's do this. And so we recorded it first with the whole group without the piccolo. And then I went into the booth later and recorded that.
I see.
over top. The one I guess I should have said ahead of time, Penelope's Knees. That is really an example of contemporary music, which uses things like quarter tones, microtones, slides. There was some slap tonguing in there, lots of altissimo, lots of wide leaps and jumps. And so that's kind of characteristic of a contemporary style piece. It was actually written for two people in Massachusetts, one, the saxophone player who was a friend of mine, Lynn Clark, and the bass player who I didn't know, Ralph Salvatore. I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name, okay. But that was that piece, and that was directed. That was a new music ensemble, and then that was directed by special guest Gunther Schuller. The next thing you heard was Find Your Own Voice, which was a children's book series, which I was on the original recording of. And Nancy, my wife Nancy, and Justin Zeno wrote all the music for that. And basically what you heard was two short interlude things where I introduced characters. And one was the piccolo, the other was the mother. And these is a series of children's books that hopefully send wonderful messages for the kids. And the last one was the Ingolf Dahl Concerto, which is, I might say, my favorite of all pieces.
Okay.
And it was originally written for wind orchestra and alto saxophone. And this is a piano reduction. And Nancy, who is so wonderful in playing stuff that a lot of people would not play. I know when we were saxophone players at Duquesne, the pianist would run away and hide when it was jury time because the music was always like, more than they wanted to tackle. This part actually has snare drum parts in it that Nancy had to play, on piano. So that's kind of interesting. But the Dahl Concerto it's a major work for saxophone. And those were most, except for Penelope's Knees and Stars and Stripes, those were all workshop related, which went on from 1990 to 2014.
Uh-huh. Getting back to the piece with the Pittsburgh New Music Ensemble, and of course I always remember David Stock was the conductor, director of that group, right? Yes. For many years. And a contemporary composer he was, right?
Right. Yes.
And I also noticed that was that the piece that Jeff Mangone played bass?
Yeah. That was a double concerto for alto saxophone and string bass.
And Jeff, of course, is not only a friend but a fraternity brother of mine as well. We were all in Duquesne. He was at Duquesne at the same time.
Yeah.
A great player and a good guy. I recognize his name there. And then Gunther Schuller, again, that name rang a bell to me because of the world of contemporary music.
Right.
And so he was the guest conductor and you were the guest artist, and you shared a story with me. I don't know if you want to elaborate on it at all or tell the story, but I thought it was pretty interesting to me. Because how things go, in that world. This is how things, it's not a perfect world, right?
No. And I'll share that, and I'll try to make it as short as possible. But Jeff Mangone and I were the soloists for this particular piece, and Gunther Schuller was the guest conductor. And yes, at the time, David Stock was the conductor of the New Music Ensemble. Well, I had quite a bit of experience playing new music and contemporary music, so I felt at home. Mm-hmm. It was a very tough and demanding piece, but in those days I didn't mind that because you just work at it,
Sure.
Well, so we were in rehearsal. Gunther Schuller was conducting. We got to this one section where you have to visualize this. This is contemporary music. Notes were written out. But for instance, I had this passage that started where it started with 2/8 notes that were spread apart that far with the ligature. Right?
Oh,
Now, what would that mean to you? That would mean these are not normal eighth notes.
right. I wouldn't even
And
know.
then the other notes were also later on spread out. So I'm playing, we get to that spot, I'm playing, and he's disgusted because, what are you doing? He says to me, what, in front of the whole group, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. I said, well, I think I'm interpreting what the composer wants. He says, you're not playing it that way. He says, here's how I want you to play it. So I said, okay, maestro, whatever you say. I played it the way he wanted me to play it. I left the rehearsal when the rehearsal was done. I called my friend in Massachusetts and I said, do you have the composer's phone number? I called the composer up.
Wow.
I mean, he answered the phone. I mean, I'm surprised at that to begin with, but he answered the phone. So I said, his name was Louis Spratlin. So I said, I'm playing your piece, with the Pittsburgh New Music Ensemble, and I have a question. So he immediately said, is it the high notes? You don't want to play the high notes because it's okay, you can take it down. I said, no, sir. I said, the high notes are no problem. Mm-hmm. I says, but here's what I did, and I forget what the bar numbers are, but as a major 32 or whatever, yeah. I says, you have this written this way. And I says, my intention is to play it like this. And I think I had my saxophone and I was playing it. And he says, yes, that's exactly what I want.
Oh.
And I said, well, Gunther Schuller doesn't want that. And I said, and I knew he was coming to the rehearsal and the concert. And I said, when we get to that spot, I'm going to play it the way Gunther Schuller told me to play it. If you're okay with that, fine. If you're not okay with that, you need to stop the orchestra and say, no, I don't want that. So I'll be darned. We got into the rehearsal. I played it Gunther's way. He stopped the orchestra. He says, I don't want it that way. He says, I'd like for the saxophone player to do this. Mm-hmm. And then, of course,
you initially did it. Yeah.
Yeah. The way I initially did it and the way I initially interpreted it.
Sure.
So I, in my own way, I sort of got back at him because he made me look like a fool in rehearsal. I made him look like a fool in the next rehearsal.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I had a lot of respect for Gunther Schuller as a musician, as whatever. New England Conservatory. He had a lot of, but I guess that was his idea of he's going to, put his thumb down on me, and I thought, I'm not taking that from you.
Yeah.
But I told the composer, I says, if you want it his way, I'll play it his way.
Yeah.
So that was the story, basically.
That was a great story. I always ask, you have stories that you have the good, bad, and the ugly, and it's the way, it's the real life of a musician.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the things that you experience. And when you're working with conductors and here's the composer and they have their interpretation, you have. But, you're right. It comes down to what did the composer intend?
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. And I thought I was fairly good at contemporary interpretation.
Yeah, that's a great story. So let's talk about the real highlights of your career. And I have a picture. I have actually two pictures I want to show. This is one here.
Yeah.
That's you and Nancy. That's your wife.
That's my wife, Nancy. Right. And I'm going to tell you that is the main highlight of my career. The fact that Nancy and I ever connected was through a friend. And she was there to accompany students in the studio recital. And then, of course, she became my accompanist. And wow, I applaud her because she would never say no to a piece. I mean, and she was always wonderful at it. So that's my main highlight because we were able to, over those 20 years of workshop, 25 years of workshop almost, to play a lot of concerts. And then, of course, she had her own production company, which was QM Productions, which she presented concerts, and we also did concerts on her productions.
Yeah.
And so I got a chance to play a lot of my favorite pieces, and she was certainly wonderful playing them. So that's my number one highlight.
Well, if I can interject, I got to know Nancy a little bit, not real well, but a little bit, because now Warren Yeckel, who was a member of the saxophone quartet, his wife was one of the music teachers in West Mifflin, Andrea.
Correct. Yeah.
And Andrea used to ask Nancy to come in and accompany her choral concerts that she had. She was teaching elementary school, and she would come in, and I got to meet Nancy there. And then I think even beyond that, Nancy was asked to be the accompanist for a couple of the musicals that we did at West Mifflin. So she was kind of involved in our music department at, if you will, at West Mifflin, and a lot of the teachers there knew her quite well. And she did. You're right. She does a terrific job, and it was. I can see how, we're very pleased to make that acquaintance, and then she became.
Absolutely.
That's
and
like,
we actually still today get together twice a week and play.
Yeah, you're the second person that I've had on the show, Jerry Tashwar, who was actually a West Mifflin kid.
Right.
Jerry is an outstanding vibraphone player in the jazz world, and his wife is his accompanist on piano, and also writes most of the music that he performs. And so it's pretty interesting. This picture here, this is another highlight of your career, right?
Right. This is a major highlight of my career. I guess I would call this number 2. This is actually at the 50th concert that we did in June of 23. And these are what I call the longtime members of the group. Okay. From the left, you have Al Morrison. You have David Matthews, George Furlow, me in the middle, Warren Yeckel, Steve Aaron, and Mike Jacob. Well, the inserts are 2 who have passed. Chet Sporney on the left there, and Marcy Westerlund on the right. And Marcy actually passed in February of 23, right before the concert. She had Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
But at any rate, to me, to be able to have been at Duquesne when I was, and the original members are Dave, George, Warren, and myself, and Mike came on shortly thereafter, really. So he almost would have been a founding member. Mm-hmm. But to meet those people that are in that photograph was very special to me. And the fact that we were still together 50 years later, and that they would, the ones who weren't currently in the quartet still came to play, because we did 4 things at the end that were big, large saxophone choir pieces, which, they graciously decided to come to make this whole event happen. And this is a treasured picture of mine and a treasured highlight of my career.
Good. Before I have another video I want to play, but before I do that, one more picture I want to put up, because I know this gentleman too.
Yeah, that's Ross Prestia at the head joint there. Yeah, and that's me playing my Mateki flute that I had picked out. The whole story here is that Ross, I was working at the time at the Brass and Wood Shop in Carnegie, and Ross was with us as the importer of the Mateki flutes, which is a handmade flute from Japan. And because of that, I got to play every flute that came into the United States.
Wow. That's awesome.
And that's how I picked the flute I wanted. I finally one came in and I said, I want this flute, But Ross had that made. A friend of his made that It's, I think, 18 foot long. It's made out of plastic.
Wow, 18 feet. Wow.
And it's made out of plastic to scale. And he would take it to the conventions, there are many trade shows that he would do. And that would be part of the calling card, oh, look at that, go look at that big flute, So, so we took that picture, just as I guess, a publicity stunt.
It's interesting, but I knew Ross's daughter, Marilyn, who was a flutist.
Yes.
And I think when she left Duquesne, she went to the Denver Symphony, I believe.
She did. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
But anyhow, before I guess was dating my wife, Lana, I dated Marilyn for, a few months, and we were good friends. And of course, I met her at a PMEA district band or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Could have been junior high, could have been high school, I don't know. But and then I got to know all of the Prestia family there. They lived, and oddly, they lived in South Park. I lived in West Mifflin, of course. And then eventually, after Lana and I got married, our second home we built in South Park. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, Ross was a good guy, and he was very much into the flute and all the instruments. Did he work at Volkwines for a while?
Yes.
Too?
Yeah. Also, he worked at Volkwines. Absolutely.
I thought so. Yeah, that's interesting. So I have another piece that I'm going to play. Tell us about this. Is called the Fuzzy Bird.
Yeah. You want me to talk about that first?
Yeah. Just tell me what we can expect that we're going to hear here.
Yeah, the Fuzzy Bird Sonata is a piece that was written by a Japanese composer, and I can never, remember his name, but Takashi Yoshimatsu. And it's a 3-movement work. And what I did is I took little small samples out of the 3 movements because, once again, in a major work like this, which it is a major work, you'll have sections where it might be, 12 or 15 bars of piano only, or 12 or 15 bars of me only. And I'm just trying to find spots where we're both playing,
Uh-huh.
And in this particular piece, the movements it's called Fuzzy Bird because the movements are like run bird, fly bird, and sing bird.
Yeah.
And it does do a lot of work with tone slides, slap tongues, altissimo, lots of altissimo, of course, double tonguing, microtones, quarter tones, and it's very contemporary.
Uh-huh.
But I'm going to have to say, much like your divertimento, it kept lyricism alive.
Okay.
So there is lyricism. But there's a lot of challenging work for both the piano and the saxophone player. And there at the beginning of the 3rd little segment, it's what we call, there's a improvised section.
Oh.
Now, we know, of course, in jazz, the players are improvising solos all the time. But in classical music, there's also improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that 3rd set after the song-like second movement, in the 3rd set, it starts in the middle of the improvised section because I didn't want to do the whole thing because it would take too long.
Yep. Gotcha.
So, the only direction is here's 2 notes to start with and end on something really high. That's the direction.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so the rest of it is to you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's basically all I need to say about that one.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a listen to the Fuzzy Bird Sonata. Here you go. That's great. Uh, One thing I can tell you, Marino, is I've gained a much greater appreciation for contemporary music, with your appearance on the show, because I was
Thank you.
never really a follower of contemporary music, but it's very interesting, and it's way more complicated and complex than one would think.
It is. As a matter of fact, in that particular piece, there are large sections where there's no real time signature.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
it's a matter of like, you really have to be on the ball.
Yeah, I've
And,
heard. Yeah.
and I applaud Nancy for that, because
Oh, yeah.
she is a wonderful accompanist. And she, like I said earlier, she doesn't want to turn anything down, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that would turn that piece down.
Yeah. Well, she's got great ears, you can tell, and she
Yeah.
knows, she's very sensitive to everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, and this is great. I have one last piece we're going to play, and before we do that, in the beginning of the show, I mentioned that you and I shared two passions. One was, of course, music, and the other passion is cooking.
Yes.
We both come from Italian families, so cooking is part of our culture. It's food
Right.
is our culture. Wine and food, that's our culture, right?
That's exactly right.
When did you get involved in cooking?
Well, I would have to say very early in my life, my mother's mother and father lived with us.
Okay, your grandparents.
Yeah, my father's mother died before I was even born, and my father's father was around, so I had three grandparents.
I see.
But as I became a little older, I'm going to say about 12 and 13 years old, the grandparents on my mother's side, were in bad shape, and mom was in the hospital visiting all the time, and that type of thing. And so it became us to do the cooking. But of course, we watched when we were little kids, like when I was 5 or 6 years old, I'd
Sure.
watch my grandmother made pizzas for a local restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Italian restaurant in town. And he would come in and pick up, I don't know, 30 pizzas or whatever it was, and we loved that, because then we would be eating,
Yeah.
I don't know how many pounds of flour she must have used, but it was a lot. And so we learned throughout that. And I also have to say that my dad was a world traveler in the Air Force, and he brought dishes to the table that were from various countries, not just Italian.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
we learned to cook early,
Yeah.
and then of course, then when I went on my own, I was doing my own cooking, and it's always been a passion. I like to watch the cooking videos on the YouTube and the other spots, and now of course I also have the passion where I like to watch Italian chefs who speak Italian, the ones who they're from Italy.
Sure.
And it's kind of interesting, because I can pick up some stuff, but I can't pick up some stuff.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good, and you see what people are doing, and then you adapt. Nancy and I are vegan, which means that we eat plant-based all the time. But there are so many wonderful options, like for us, there's no shortage.
Right. That's interesting. Well, I was probably 30 years old. I did a little bit of cooking when I was younger. Most of the cooking I did then was if we had leftovers. I was called the leftover king, because I would turn it into some really good dish.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And then but when I was, up until the age of 30, I think I was just so immersed in music.
Yes.
I didn't pay attention to anything else in the world other than the woman that I married, And I became about 30, and I thought, geez, I've had a lot of music, and I feel good about it, and my path is set. I know what I'm doing. What else is there in the world? And the other thing that I got interested was making wine, making sausage, and cooking. And that's what I did.
That's like a trinity, right?
Yeah, the Trinity is right.
Well, here, I'm going to just say this very quickly. I'll make it very fast.
Go ahead.
When I did move to Canada, I was working a lot on flute because I knew I was going to be teaching flute.
Okay.
So I would take just the head joint while I was making sauce, and I would be blowing in the head joint, while I'm stirring the sauce and cooking the sauce and stuff.
Funny.
And that's how I would practice, multiply my practice.
That's right. That's really good. That's funny. Well, this last piece we're going to play before I let you go, it's called Lowly Toadfish in the Holy Om. So maybe give us a little description before I play this, and then we'll play this last piece.
Again, Nancy does a lot of work with drums, and in particular, she works a lot with the djembe drum, which is a peace gathering type of a drum. And there are pieces written for that particular duo, I'll say, not necessarily for djembe, but percussion and saxophone. But we thought we'd like to commission a piece because we were going to be doing this concert at West Liberty University, and we thought that'd be a nice addition. So through connections Nancy had with Point Park University, we found this girl who was interested in writing a piece for us. We got together. She came over. We talked about what each instrument could do and ranges and things like that, and maybe played pieces for her that what the saxophone's capable of doing in a contemporary setting. Mm-hmm. This is very rhythmic, this piece, of course, because of the drum. And there are, again, this is a small section because the whole piece starts off just with saxophone for, 20 bars or whatever it is. Uh-huh. And so I didn't want to include that because it's just saxophone. Okay. But so we mentioned her write this piece, and it's about 6 minutes long or something. But she wrote this and called it. Well, we didn't say anything about naming or anything, But the Holy Om is a Hindu chant, Om, and it's basically a homage to the Hindu gods. And a lowly toadfish, as far as I know, is just a lowly toadfish. Probably in the pond where they're meditating, I guess. Right. But and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But that's what that is. But the whole piece starts off with me, which you're not going to hear that. But and it starts off by saying, and the lowly toad starts to sing. I see. And so this piece, we liked it a lot. We played it a few times there in workshops and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So this is Emily Jones wrote this for alto saxophone and djembe drum. Okay, let's give it a listen. Let's share this with the audience here. Here we go. Wow, that's interesting.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
and that's another one of those pieces where, although there are time signatures, the
Uh-huh.
music is written in a way that you really have to pull it apart and spend time with it, because there's a lot of stuff where it has to be together, and it's written, I don't want to say awkwardly, because that is not correct, but it's written not in the way we are trained to read it, like when we're in school,
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you have a lot of 7/8, 3/8, 9/8 with, so many 16th rests and notes, all over the place. So you really have to pay attention.
Well, that's great. Well, it's wonderful. Marino, it's been wonderful having you on the show.
Well, thank you very much.
Congratulations on your remarkable career, and I hope you have continued success and keep playing. Keep doing it.
Yeah, I am. It's just for me now, but yeah, I enjoy it.
Okay. Is there anything else before we sign off that you wanted to mention or say?
The only thing I can say is that we all have our journeys.
Yep.
And
for sure.
Yeah, and we all arrive at those crossroads where we say, I wonder what would have happened if I did this.
Yeah.
I wonder what would happen if I did this. And I think about all of those things, and I say to myself, not an issue, because this is where I am. I'm happy to be where I am.
Right.
And I wouldn't have met my wife. I look at it that way. I wouldn't have met my wife. So I just say, follow your instincts. Do what you think you need to do at the time. Because you're going to always hit those crossroads. So thank you for having me on your show, Vito. This has been a true pleasure for me. And I wish you nothing but tons of success with your shows. I've watched all of them. I'm going to continue to watch all of them.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And spread the word.
I will definitely do that.
Okay, Marino, you have a great day. We'll talk to you.
You as well. Thank you.
Ciao. And there we have it. We have another episode of Memories of a Musician. Marino Galluzzo, great saxophone and woodwind artist. You heard him play piccolo, flute, soprano sax, alto sax. He covers everything. So it's a wonderful program and getting to know another side of Marino that I personally didn't know. Now we look forward to our next week, and next week's guest is a guy named Clem Rowland. And Clem is, he was the band director. I consider Clem now a band guy, like I was really. Being a euphonium player, I played in bands more than orchestras, certainly. And Clem, a lot like me, taught, and he was the band director of bands for, I believe, the South Fayette School District, Montour School District, as well as the university, Robert Morris, I believe, University, and is still currently the music director for the West Hills Symphonic Band, which way back in the 70s, I did some work for them, and I was very familiar with that group back then. But anyhow, Clem is also a player, plays in all kind of different groups and settings, plays valve trombone and keyboard, bass, and he plays bass, and he's a vocalist. So we'll look forward to seeing Clem next Wednesday. So stay tuned on the show, and we'll look for you at another time. Thank you, and have a great evening.